Coming up on Over a Barrel.
I would say that if OPEC didn't give us any more surprises, and if Saudi Arabia didn't spook the market with comments, and if we can get through hurricane season, then, I don't know, we're really close.
But close to what? Over a Barrel starts right now. And welcome to Over a Barrel. I'm your co-host, Matt McLean, alongside Patrick DeHaan, the other co-host. Hello, Patrick, and how are you?
Good, Matt. Good to be with you here as we kind of face down the dog days of summer.
I know. We have been doing this podcast now for months. I'm really enjoying it, and I know that we are getting a lot of folks that are starting to send us questions every week about things that they are interested in, stuff that they are wanting to know about. And my understanding is you kind of have some of those right in front of you right now, actually.
Yeah, actually I do. Lucky number, episode number 25, Matt. We have a few questions. So, great opportunity for tell people that aren't aware that, shoot us a message. Love to hear from you, comments, criticism. Tell me what I need to talk about, or if we need to have more bourbon involved in the show. I think always more bourbon's a good thing. But so let's start it off with a couple questions. Chris came through on social media on Twitter, actually, and his question was this. Let's say there are no hurricanes impacting refineries this summer. Is it safe to assume that gas prices have peaked for the year? Great question, Chris. It's a real loaded one because there's a lot more, hurricane season is obviously something, Matt, that we've talked a lot about. But there's a lot of other factors that are kind of wild cards this year, Matt. We've talked a lot about the economy. The way that could go. I think right now, as we stand here in August, we're on a better footing than we were a couple of months ago, but nothing's a shoo-in yet. So,
right.
The wild card is the economy and then OPEC, because Saudi Arabia just did extend their production cut of 1 million barrels a day into the month of September. So they've been at this now 3 months. I would say that if OPEC didn't give us any more surprises, and if Saudi Arabia didn't spook the market with comments, and if we can get through hurricane season, then I don't know, we're really close. The yearly peak actually just happened a couple of days ago when the national average hit $3.81. So the question is, have we peaked? Well, I can't definitively tell you, but again, I think it's going to come down to if OPEC gives us any more curveballs. If they don't, and if we can get out of hurricane season, which are two really big what ifs. It's kind of like, hey, Matt, can I avoid getting struck by lightning in the middle of a storm? I don't know.
On that. It's possible.
Yeah. Don't get struck by lightning. Hopefully the market doesn't get struck by lightning. So it's kind of a loaded answer, but maybe. Maybe, Matt.
That is kind of a loaded question for sure. And I know that one of the questions that I have been seeing actually involves oil production. I'm seeing some stories out there that indicates that the U.S. is now projected to rise to an average of 12.8 million barrels per day this year. And that, according to this story, is for the first time ever, according to federal estimates released this week. So is that kind of a cherry-picked situation? I mean, kind of elaborate on that just a little bit. Or are we really, really pumping a lot of oil now?
Well, we're pumping a lot of oil, Matt, but the trick is the viewpoint, because there's different ways to look at things, right? Are we pumping more compared to a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, compared to our peak? A lot of people like to look back differently and make comparisons. And the truth of the matter is that we are starting to get back to close to what we were producing prior to the pandemic. And by the way, before we get too politically charged here, the pandemic is what decimated oil production. Right. This was not something that the White House, President Trump actually worked to get Saudi Arabia and Russia to cut oil production back in 2020 because the Saudis and the Russians were flooding the market with cheap oil. And that would have had long-term consequences, Matt, on the U.S. oil industry. It would have really weakened it because oil companies, if Saudi Arabia and Russia flood the market with cheap oil, that's not a good thing. That derails the U.S. oil industry. So President Trump actually acted to protect the oil sector by trying to get Saudi Arabia and Russia to stop production. Now, in hindsight, Matt, we were at the height of the pandemic. And then things changed very abruptly, right? Back in 2021, we started around the corner. America started to reopen. And then in 2022, all of us had cabin fever. And so all of those oil production cuts, Matt, back in 2020 and 2021 impacted how high prices eventually went, because all of a sudden, Matt, as the economy reopened, people were hitting the road in feverish numbers and oil production was kind of lagging behind. And part of the reason was because the low price of oil decimated oil companies. They didn't want to produce. They were shutting down. Some of them went broke. And then things just heated up way too quickly, kind of like throwing gasoline on a fire, right? It's not a slow burn. So are we producing more? On a yearly basis, 2023 will probably be above our previous record, which was 2019 and early 2020. And then back in early 2020, oil production plummeted. So on a yearly basis, Matt, yeah, I think 2023 will be record setting. On a monthly basis, we're not quite there yet. That is, August 2023 as we stand is not going to be probably as much oil production as we saw just before the pandemic in February of 2020. So, we're not quite there, but if you average it over the course of the year, we are. So there, hopefully that answers your question, but telling you that people look at it a little differently. Some people like to look month to month. And again, we're not at the peak month, but if you look at the year, we're probably at a peak year if you average it out. So
my dream of having 99 cents a gallon for gas is probably gone.
That's a pipe dream.
Darn. I was,
unless there's another pandemic, Matt, or if the nation, if everyone were to wake up tomorrow and you're the only guy left with a gasoline powered vehicle, then yeah, you'd probably be filling up for a penny a gallon. So, if there's sudden shocks to supply or demand, it could happen again. But again, it only happened because of a extremely exceptional circumstance, one of which you and I have never seen in our lifetimes.
So if that were to happen, I should go buy a lottery ticket. That's what you're saying.
Your odds are probably better getting struck by lightning than for us to have another pandemic.
Fantastic. Okay.
Hopefully it doesn't happen.
Well, that's true. 99 cents a gallon. I was hopeful. There's another question. This one is actually from Pedro, and he says, what price might we see the early stages of demand price, like diesel and gasoline? And do you, Patrick, see anything different this year from prior years?
Well, I'll try to answer it the best I can. What price might we see the early stages of demand? I'm not really sure what that first part of the question means. Do I see anything different? Well, I think what Pedro might be asking is, are people backing off with prices rising? Not so much. People, as evidenced by last year, Matt, when prices hit $5 a gallon, there were still a lot of people hitting the road. And it's because you only get, 3 or 4 months? I'm in Chicago. You're a little further south, so you might get 4 months of summer, but up here in Chicago, it's like 3 months.
Depends on the year. Sometimes we get 6 months.
Yeah, hey, I'd love it. I'd love to see palm trees in here, Matt. And if I could wear shorts in Chicago year round, I'm happy. But, people don't respond as much to prices in the summer because, again, they only get, your kids are only out of school for 2 or 3 months, right? The warmest weather is from really mid-June to mid-August. So there's a very limited window of opportunity, Matt, and people tend to not really care as much of prices during that window because what are you going to do? Wait around for another year for that window to open back up? Mm-hmm. So, that has to do with price elasticity. That is, prices are more inelastic in the summer. That is, people don't care about the prices as much. We'll complain about it. But overall, Matt, ultimately, I don't like $5 gas, but if there's a couple months I don't really care as much, it's during the summer. So
that's a very good point.
If you only had 2 months a year that the kids are out of school that you can road trip, I don't think prices are going to be the first, major thing that you're thinking about. They're certainly a factor.
Yeah, I was just going to say, maybe you, depending upon the price of gas, if it's over $4 a gallon, you might say instead of going, on an 800 or 1,000 mile trip, we might go on a 400 mile trip, but we're still going to try to go on a trip,
Yeah, and that's much more sensible. And so, people aren't responding as much to the price in the summer months. Now, in the fall, when people don't have to drive as much, Matt, or when they're saying, oh, hey, there's, let's go on a foliage tour, then people might be slowed down if gas prices at $5 a gallon, because, seeing the fall leaves or whatever is probably nice, but people don't have to do it. If gas prices at $5 or $6, yeah, you're probably going to see a lot more people say, throw in the towel and say, I forget it. So hopefully that answered Pedro's question.
Absolutely. And we also have another question. This one is from Luther. What's your view on diesel price?
Oh, yikes. It's not a great time to own a diesel. We bottomed out with the price of diesel in mid-July, and it's gone up significantly, Matt, because a lot of the view on the economy, right? We've talked about the possibility of UPS strike, what that would do. Logistics and trucking and freight have been hit hard, right? Because Americans, well, here's what happened, right? 2020, 2021, Americans loaded up with stuff, right? Because we're stuck inside. And so retail companies all were buying a ton of stuff to fill their shelves, right? That's when you heard about the port in LA, right? The Long Beach port was just so far behind. Ships were waiting to moor because people wanted stuff. But then people stopped wanting stuff after the pandemic started to ease. And so retail stores
got the stuff they wanted.
Exactly. And so now retail stores have not been buying as much because their shelves have been stocked because people aren't buying as much. So my view on diesel is that now that retailers have worked through a lot of that inventory, they've sold through a lot of it. It took a while. But now freight is starting to make a bounce back. So my view on diesel, and especially, Matt, we're going into the winter. And for those that don't know, heating oil is still what people use to heat their homes in areas of rural New England. So there's a lot of demand. Heating oil and diesel are essentially the same product. And so going into the winter, Matt, when people need to heat their homes, so, people heat their homes with heating oil. And so diesel and heating oil are the same. So what happens to demand in the winter for heating oil? It goes up. Right. So that, and, with freight shipments starting to go back up again, especially ahead of the holidays. And in your neck of the woods, right? You're in Southern Illinois, so you're very familiar with the cornfields all over, and in Kentucky, there's a lot of harvesting that'll have to be done. And there's the farm equipment uses diesel. So Matt, I think I'm bullish on diesel, meaning prices for diesel are likely to face more upward pressure in the months ahead. Gasoline, maybe not so much. So hopefully that answered Luther's question, but I think diesel prices could remain at or above the $4 a gallon mark for probably, the next few months, maybe
shame.
Longer.
That's a shame for those who have, because, diesel vehicles, in many ways, as far as mileage goes, diesel motors seem to be superior, obviously, than gasoline. So I think that seems to be the allure to a lot of people. I mean, even Volkswagen made little bug cars, with a diesel engine. So
yeah,
I guess there's a lot of love for that diesel aspect, but there has been such a huge disparity between the two prices in the last probably decade or so.
Yeah.
It didn't used to be that way.
No,
at all. In fact, sometimes gasoline was more than diesel, and I haven't seen it
a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I haven't seen it that way in years. I mean, it's been a very long time since I've seen it.
Yeah, that's a great point, Matt. I was gonna say, how many emails that I've seen over the years in social media that people, hey, why is diesel so expensive now? Because and the refrain I hear often is diesel's a byproduct of gasoline. Well,
I always thought it was until you told me that's not true.
Yeah. So, I mean, a great point to cover that now is that there's really, back in the 1920s and 30s when, refiners were going after things like whale oil, there might be products that were less desirable, right? Like gasoline, they didn't need as much, or even diesel, they didn't need as much. So they would literally dump it. But now there's no byproducts, Matt, because in the decades, as the refining industry has matured, there's a use for everything that comes out of refineries. So there's no byproducts. Refineries produce everything because there's a need for jet fuel, diesel, bunker oil, marine oil, plastics. Propane, kerosene. Every part of that barrel is used. Even things like, the heavy parts, Matt, asphalt,
Yeah.
So, And to that point, the paradigm shift for diesel, Matt, is that for a while, diesel's been cleaner in terms of sulfur content than gasoline. Diesel actually had less sulfur than gasoline. And diesel used to be, back in the 60s and 70s, used to be filthy, dirty, sooty.
Oh, yeah. Well, even in the
And
80s.
diesel, yeah. I mean, we all have those visions, right, of getting behind a diesel vehicle, and it was like,
Black
am I in a?
smoke.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No,
So-
the big black smoke barreling out, and even trains that used.
Oh, yeah.
diesel. The big black smoke, billowing out of the
Oh,
train
yeah.
locomotive. I remember that very, very well.
Ugh, so sooty. And Matt, that's what created a lot of the pollution issues, right? That's kind of why the Clean Air Act came along in the 70s to clean up, because, from CFCs, right, to all of these different emissions, we became very aware once we were ripping a hole in the ozone, right? We really got serious, and diesel was one of the worst for emissions. And so over the years, diesel has had a lot of improvements in how clean it burns. And look at the semi trucks, Matt. Now, if you see a semi truck parked, you'll see a federal sticker that says certified clean idle.
Yeah.
Because now it's required that those semi trucks have clean idles, and diesel essentially burns much cleaner now than it used to. It has less sulfur, it has less nitrogen. Diesel vehicles, Matt, you've probably seen the DEF, right? Diesel exhaust fluid.
Yeah.
So so people say diesel used to be a byproduct. Well, now diesel is
It's its own thing.
well, right now the price of diesel is more expensive than gasoline, Matt. So if you want to, talk about byproduct, gasoline right now is really the byproduct. Refineries want to produce diesel because there's more value there. So, that's kind of why diesel has kind of eternally changed over the last couple of decades. And a lot of it had to do with the switch to ultra low sulfur diesel, which happened back in 2006. Since then, diesel's been much cleaner.
Yeah, it almost makes me want to go out and buy a diesel vehicle just for the cleanliness of it all. But then I look at the price at the pump and I'm going, no.
Well, and diesel engines are more efficient too.
They are. They can take licking, so to speak, and keep on ticking.
There you go. They can take a licking and keep on ticking. I mean, how many gasoline powered cars have you ever seen that have gone 400, 500,000 miles? But that's routinely what you see in a semi.
Exactly. I was going to say not that many. You're lucky to get 200, 250 out of a vehicle. And then after that, it starts, breaking down. But yeah, a diesel, it's just getting warmed up.
Yeah.
It's like, no big deal.
Back when I used to write service, Matt, we did see a pickup truck that came in once. It was gasoline powered pickup truck, which is kind of rare because some of these bigger pickups, people like their dualies or their Cummins diesel. So I looked at the clock being the odometer in the truck, and it was only a 5-year-old truck, Matt, and it had 250,000 miles. And this is on gasoline. And I double checked it because gasoline engines do not typically have that length. You'd expect 250,000 out of diesel. And it was just, I averaged it out, Matt. And because it was a model year, it was like a 4-year-old or 5-year-old truck. I averaged that out over 250,000 miles. And basically the math came out to the person driving an average speed of 25 miles an hour, 24/7. Yeah. I mean, I think it was actually a technician that worked on oil rigs, and he drove all over the country.
Well, you remember the Dodge Avenger that I used to drive.
Oh, yeah.
I've actually been a passenger in that vehicle. I actually got about 240,000 miles on it before a deer totaled it. But I got about
the deer totaled it, or that's a pretty good effort. Did it get angry?
Apparently it was suicidal, I guess. I don't know, but whatever the case may be, the deer went airborne and that car was a tank. But yeah, I got about 240,000 miles. And if the deer had not totaled the car, it probably would have, I don't know how much more it would have gone.
Yeah.
But I was really happy about that, I have to admit, and sad that I, suddenly had to develop a car payment.
That's going from no car payment to a payment's, always kind of a thorn in the side. It's like, a little bit more money is siphoned out of your paycheck,
That's
so
exactly what it does. But yes, 240,000 miles, and that I think is the most I have ever gotten out of a vehicle. I think the previous years and years, and like in the 1990s, I think I got like 200 out of a Chevrolet Cavalier way back in the day. But it's very rare to get that kind of mileage out of a vehicle for sure. And it's almost kind of like one of those things where you want to have a plaque on the wall with a picture of that car because it's so unique that it actually survived that long. But there's a lot of stuff out there, and I know that a lot of different questions regarding diesel and gasoline. You're thinking that the price point really over the next 7 to 10 days, are we kind of steadying off a little bit? Because I have seen the price increase even this week. I have been in 1, 2, 3, 4 different states this week, and we are not even done with the work week yet, and I will be in a 5th state or 6th state tomorrow. So there's a lot there, and I have seen prices really, really increase over the past couple of weeks, up to 50, 60 cents a gallon.
Well, the good news, Matt, is that a lot of those increases are starting to slow down. The bad news is now we have 7 states that are seeing gas prices actually more expensive than last year. So, kind of depressing. The July CPI numbers just came out and they were a little bit better than expected, meaning that inflation, maybe I have that wrong. Maybe inflation was a little bit hotter than expectations. But what I was going to say is that this is going to be July's data is going to be the last month that inflation numbers look that good, because back in June, Matt, there was $1 a gallon year-on-year difference. And in July, there was about a 95-cent difference between July of 2023 and July of 2022. That is, prices averaged 95 cents lower this year than last year. August now, as we stand in mid-August here, Matt, the national average is now only 15.8 cents lower than it was last year. So some of this inflation data is not going to look as good, Matt. And I'm a little worried that by September, at some point in September, the year-on-year average may actually be more. But, if you're taking a trip, we're down a penny from a week ago. So you're not going to save a whole lot of pennies, but you'll save a couple of them.
I'll save about a nickel probably total at all of that. Well, that's so you're basically what you're saying is while everyone is rejoicing and saying that the inflation numbers are down, that there's going to be a short-lived situation because of basically the price of fuel. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, essentially there's going to be a potentially short-lived decrease. How long that decrease goes, Matt, right now it doesn't look like it's going to be real deep. It just looks like prices are going to stabilize around this level. But again, as we've just talked about in past episodes, hurricane season and of course what OPEC does is a worry. We are also probably beyond the peak now for gasoline. Gasoline demand is likely to start going down. And then by mid-September, actually about 5 weeks from today, Matt, we switch back to cheaper winter gasoline. And that should provide a little bit of downward momentum. But all in all, don't expect, I'm hopeful that the national average won't go above the $4 mark. But as we've covered, it might if there's a major hurricane. I would expect most areas are going to be in the mid to upper $3 a gallon range for the rest of the summer. So if that's good news or bad news, it's certainly not the best news, but
it is what it is. How about that? I won't call it good or bad. Hey, we do have a question from one of our social media accounts. I'm not sure if we're calling it Twitter or X. I'm still trying to figure that one out as well myself. But it's the question is certainly valid. In your professional opinion, what would be the number one way to help make everyone happy when it comes to fuel prices, not just in America, but globally? So what is your opinion on all of that?
Well, I'm curious what your opinion is, Matt, too. In fact, I'd like to hear your opinion on what would make you happy, and what do you think it would be, I kind of want to throw this back at you and say, I'm curious before I give my opinion, what yours might be as a consumer.
I already gave you my opinion. 99 cents a gallon sounds fantastic.
Oh, Matt, come on, be reasonable.
I thought that was being reasonable, but I think,
What's a happy medium? I mean, here's the problem, Matt. For businesses to thrive, they need to be profitable.
Correct.
But I mean, here's the thing. The oil sector has been either massively profitable or the opposite, where they just are hemorrhaging billions of dollars.
Yeah. It's feast or famine situation.
It's boom or bust. So, as a consumer, what do you think it would take for an oil company to be happy, like the price for oil? And what do you think it would take for you to be happy, and kind of mix those two interests?
I'm going to look at it from the consumer side for the price at the pump. I would think that as long as you can keep prices somewhere between $2.50 and $2.99 a gallon for a price at the pump for regular unleaded gas, I feel like that, and keep it consistent, around the year, a 12-month year, calendar year. I think that most people would be, it's not 99 cents a gallon, but at least it's not $5.
I think people would agree with that.
So then the key is, would the oil companies, because I'm trying to do the math, because a barrel of oil is not gallons, it is
42.
That's what I was just going to say. It's like a British barrel, which is like 42 gallons or 55 liters. I don't even know what that all it translates into. But yes, it's not a full 55 gallons. So what does that translate into? I can't do the math in the top of my head, but you probably already have. I mean,
Well, there's no magic ratio either, by the way. So
yeah, I mean, to me, that's what sounds reasonable at the pump, and figuring out a way to, especially for logistics companies, shipping companies, to get that price of diesel down to almost a sense of parity with gasoline. To be honest with you, I think would also be quite beneficial for our economy.
well, there's no doubt about that. That having a reliable price is the best, because then it's businesses like stability. Stability is always better than volatility. So
I mean, I before you even, I will also say this one additional thing, because as a business owner myself, I do video production and all of that. As a business owner, it is, you're always taught in quote unquote business classes to, do like a 6 month and a 1 year and try to figure out how to grow your business. It had that in my mind, that model has been thrown out the window for the last 5, 6, 7 years. You're lucky if you can, hit your target 30, 60, and 90 days out from today, simply because the volatility of everything, shipping, gas prices, you name it, everything has just literally been.
Oh, it's a tough world.
It's been very
it's inflation, right? Everyone's been trying to keep up, and that's why the Fed now, right, is raising interest rates really quickly, because they're trying to slow down growth. So, I mean, you kind of have to peel back the onion before everything can really adjust, right?
Yeah.
Things need to throttle back. So,
but that to me stifles economic development, because how can you plan 30, 60, 90 days out and still not be able to hit the target on the wall, let alone 6 months to a year? It creates a lot of instability. And as I know I am not the only business owner who thinks that way. I have talked to many, and all of them come back with like, yeah, we just don't know. And that creates a lot of that uncertainty that I think if you could provide that, not you as in Patrick DeHaan, but you as the general term, could provide that stability. I think, in all honesty, Americans would just overall be a lot happier, and really, citizens around the world would be a lot happier.
Yeah, I think so. And to your point, the part of the equation here, right, is what price is acceptable for oil companies and what price is acceptable for consumers. But one of the things that a lot of people forget about is that, speaking of inflation, taxes are a form of inflation as well. So, states, as the cost has gone up to repair roads, Matt, labor costs are up, material costs are up, concrete, asphalt, they are not cheap. States have raised gasoline taxes considerably. Yeah. So even if you have a acceptable amount, acceptable price for crude oil, that usually would translate into a decent price for gasoline, but taxes have gone up so much that the calculus changes, because right now, the way it breaks down, Matt, is a barrel of oil is 42 gallons. Let's say the price of oil is $80 a barrel, which it's a little bit above that. That breaks down to about $1.90 for every gallon of oil, but that oil still has to be refined. It still has to be taxed. It still has to be transported. So right now, Matt, and right now, one of the kinks, as we often say, is refineries. There's just not enough refining capacity. So that limits how much oil you can run, right? There's not a finite, or I should say there is a finite amount of gasoline right now. There's not an infinite amount of supply. So refineries right now are acting as a limiting factor. So that has to be taken into consideration when you talk about this ratio between the price of oil and gasoline. So $80 a barrel is $1.90 a gallon of oil. And right now, taxes add about 50 to 60 cents a gallon. So if you take that $1.90, not even talking about the amount of the cost to refine it, $1.90, if you tack on about 50 or 60 cents for taxes, you're at about $2.40, $2.50 a gallon. Then you have to run it through a refinery. Then you have to market it. You have to transport it. Transportation can add up to be about 25 to 45 cents a gallon too, depending on where it's going and depending on, where it's coming from. Some of these, some of these crude carriers are coming from really long distances away. So,
and in difficult circumstances, because take, for example, in North Dakota, I know that they've done some pipelines, but a lot of it is brought out on
transit trucks. Yeah. So, I mean, exactly. So it's a little convoluted, but I think oil companies would be pretty happy at $80 to $85 a barrel.
So basically where we are right now.
I mean, yeah, I think you're going to see more oil production. And Matt, I'll remind you that even with $65 oil, oil producers they're not going to be chasing that, right, as much. It's kind of like a somebody that's been flipping houses. They probably don't want to flip right now because mortgage rates are high. There's a high risk that they're not going to be able to return their investment. And that's why oil companies haven't grown as much this year, because with depressed oil prices, there's more risk that if they supply too much oil, they're going to undermine the price, which is going to, in the long run, hurt them. So oil companies have been very cautious on slowly bringing capacity back. But having said that, U.S. oil production is up compared to where it was last year. So that's the good news. And I think oil producers would be pretty happy with $85 to $90 a barrel. And that's what we're finding out, Matt, is that Saudi Arabia and Russia have cut back production. That's part of the reason oil is at $83 to $84 a barrel. That's going to open up the door. U.S. oil producers are going to say, hey, let's boost output because oil prices are $15 higher than they were 2 months ago. So, and eventually in the long run, if oil prices stay at $85 or $90 a barrel, U.S. producers are going to keep investing to keep raising oil production. So, in the long run, that's good news. But, speaking about it politically, you heard that production is up. It is up. And the good news, if prices stay where they are today, I think that's a good balance. So to answer the question that we got there from social media, everyone would be happy. I think at probably $80 a barrel. But the thing is oil companies would be happy at $80 a barrel. But for that to translate into an affordable gas price, Matt, an affordable diesel price, we really need more capacity at refineries. That's been the disconnect.
That's good. Okay. So that's my question. You literally took the words right out of my mouth, because I'm thinking, so basically what you're saying is we just simply need to get happy with where the prices are at the pump and deal with it. But what you're saying is the bottleneck, so to speak, or the hiccup in the way that it's all, situated is the refinery situation, correct?
Yeah. And why didn't we hear about this refining situation, or why didn't it impact us before COVID? Because before COVID, we had enough, we just barely. We had more capacity. Refining capacity today, Matt, is still 1 million barrels a day below what it was prior to COVID. And a lot of that damage came from 2019 when a major refinery in the Northeast caught fire, and it's been permanently shut down and it's dismantled. They're turning it into apartments now. So,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was a 330,000 barrel a day refinery, Matt. It produced millions of gallons of gasoline every day. So the problem is that, and by the way, refining capacity right now in the United States is about 18 million barrels a day. It was 19 million barrels a day prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic caused a lot of shutdowns. I mean, refineries, they don't make money when they're selling gasoline at 99 cents. So
that is why Mr. Wonderful Kevin O'Leary was saying
exactly
he wants to build another refinery.
Exactly. But refining, just like oil, Matt, has been a boom bust cycle. In 2020, refineries shut down because people weren't buying gasoline, and the gasoline they were buying was worth, the wholesale price, Matt, was only like 30 cents a gallon. You're not going to be profitable selling something, for 30 cents a gallon. I mean, even the dollar store, Matt, is like now the $2 store,
Oh, they went back to it. Dollar Tree, for example, has gone back to $1 on a lot of items.
A lot of items that, yeah, sure. And Matt, the price of gasoline's $1.99 per half gallon.
This is true.
So, I mean, there's ways, there's semantics. Yeah, there was some talk about that, people pricing by the half gallon, but I mean, gallons, it's just like, hey, you go to the grocery store, Matt, and,
shrinkflation.
Yeah. 2 liters. Now they're trying to sell you 550 milliliter bottles or 1.5 liters. Like, what is this? Get that out of here. A half gallon of ice cream is no longer a half gallon.
No, it's not.
It's like what? 2.4 pints or something ridiculous.
Yeah. Basically, it is still possible to get a dozen eggs and a gallon of milk, but if you want juice or even some of the fresh lemonades in bottles, you're not going to get a gallon or a half gallon. You're going to get, like you said, that 60 ounces, that 52 ounces, that whatever. Cereal, good luck getting a pound of cereal. Good luck getting a pound of potato chips, getting, all of that stuff. Canned items are no longer at a 16-ounce variable. I've had a lot of recipes, for example, that will call for like fresh crushed tomatoes and all of that. And, they'll say a 16-ounce can of crushed tomatoes. And I'm looking on the can, I'm like, oh, 12.75. Great. And that's just the world that we are in. It's a shrinkflation situation.
Yeah, exactly right. So, getting back to it, I think somewhere in the $85 range would be happy for oil companies. But again, with taxes going up, that may not translate to $2.99 anymore, Matt. It's an $85 barrel price will translate to maybe $3 during winter when we're not on the summer blend. But during the summer, it might translate to $3.25. So, and a lot of that, Matt, is people are like, oh, during this politician, it was under $3. Well, sure. But taxes have gone up a lot in almost every state compared to where they were 10 years ago. So you have to factor in the other rising costs. It's not just the price of oil that determines gasoline.
You've depressed me. I just want you to know.
Time for over a barrel?
Yeah. Yes. Just maybe not a barrel of oil.
Well, I'll leave you with this, Matt. I'm hopeful that over the next couple of months, we could see some downward pressure, but there's still a lot of wild cards. And for those that are trying to road trip and can't afford it, or don't want to, sign up for the Pay with Gas Buddy card. A reminder, you can always go to the Pay with Gas Buddy at pay.gasbuddy.com. You can save up to 25 cents a gallon. Matt, I know you do, and I do. I have the pay card, and it works wonderfully every time. I like saving. Well, I have the premium Pay with Gas Buddy card, and I get free roadside assistance included. And I also save a guaranteed at least 20 cents a gallon. So if you haven't signed up for that, check out the program. Like I said, it's a lot of stations, Matt. If I pull up my Gas Buddy app, I can find prices much below the retail price at a lot of stations. So check it out. But that's my plug for now. If you want to, Matt, people can find us on social, right?
They absolutely can. On X, I guess we'll start calling it that. I don't know. This seems to be where everything's moving towards. So Over a Barrel Show, also Gas Buddy Guy, and Over a Barrel Matt. You can, of course, get us on there, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. We don't have a Facebook page yet, do we?
No, we don't. We don't have a Facebook page.
We should probably create one between now and the next episode. That might not be a terrible idea, to be honest.
No, it might not. And hey, while we're at it, one last closing question. Somebody asked about, given the rise in oil and demand, are we more likely to see a $5 gallon average in 2024 or $3?
Bite your tongue. Bite your tongue.
Maybe we'll leave that for the next episode. That's what we'll cover next episode. But thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll cover that question a whole lot more right here on Over a Barrel. Have a good one.